Welcome back, everyone. I am super excited today to have my friend, Dr. Martin Mendelson. And don't worry, I'm not going to call him doctor the whole time, although I didn't ask him beforehand if that was okay, but I consider him a friend. So I'm going to call him Martin today. Why I'm super excited is because Martin is just an incredible character. And I'll say character because he really is a jack of all trades. And let me tell you why. Dr. Martin Mendelson is a resident faculty member at Spear Education and founder of Metamorphosis Coaching. With nearly 20 years of experience and certification in executive coaching, team coaching, facilitation, emotional intelligence, which, Lord have mercy, we need more of that in this world, right? Because it can be taught, folks. Just so you know, it can be taught. I'm living proof. And happiness studies. Dr. Mendelson has empowered leaders and teams across North America to excel and thrive. As a captivating speaker, astute coach, and masterful team facilitator, he unleashes the power of his innovative team, that's T.E.A.M, we're going to talk about that, approach, and guiding clients to shed their burdens of traditional leadership and embrace cohesion for unparalleled business growth and personal fulfillment. Welcome to my friend Martin. Welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I always sit here and I go, wow, that's a long introduction. I need to shorten that. But thank you.
Well, I could have, but I didn't. No worries. And so I want to frame as well, just right up top. And so, the DR doctor. So I just want to let my listening audience know that actually comes from Wet Hand Clinical Dentistry, correct? Could you just share a little bit of that before we get into all of the fun stuff that I love talking about, which is the coaching and the mentoring and the leadership and leadership differently from what it was 10, 15 years ago. So could you just share a little bit of that to frame who you are for those that really don't know who you are?
Absolutely. So I'll ask you a really bizarre question first. Remember Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
Oh, of
Remember,
course. That was one of my
remember,
favorite, right? In the Island
remember,
of Misfit Toys, wasn't that the same? Yeah.
yeah, remember Hermie who wanted to be a dentist? Well, that was me, my friend. No, I
The
actually
elf that
started,
wanted to be a dentist, and that's what
yeah,
he told us. Yes, instead
yeah,
of making toys. Yes.
yeah. I started at 16, believe it or not, in a dental office. It came up from my cousin Barry. It was in medical school with the dental students. It was one of those universities. And he said, you ever think about dental school? And long story short, I ended up working for a friend's uncle. And so from 16 years of age, I wanted to be that dentist. I went to dental school, came out in a private practice, never thought that anything was going to be different for me. And about 8.5, 9 years into clinical practice, I started to have problems with my hand. And so I ended up being bounced out of clinical practice due to issues with my hand. I was actually misdiagnosed for the first 7 years of my journey. And talk about mindset, talk about emotional intelligence. I was out of work for 17 months. And so this was also pre-internet, the way it is today, pre-smartphone, period. And so I had to really figure out what was next for me the old fashioned way. I had to, oh my goodness, call people. And so it was quite a journey to get to that next first step. Work for a dental laboratory as a liaison between the dentist and the lab, work for corporate dentistry for a while. And then 13 years ago came to Spear Education. While I was at Spear, I was tasked and asked to really kind of flesh out our engagement with our study club leaders to help them be better leaders, to help the members get more out of the platform because, time and money is valuable. And so that's where I kind of half stumbled into coaching. And that's almost 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years ago next year, formal coaching. And I ended up with certifications in executive coaching, team coaching, emotional intelligence, happiness studies, which is a thing. Actually, the program that I have a certification from is now a master's. Don't ask me about my grumbliness about that. But anyway, so it's now a master's. So I can't claim I have a master's, but it's the same curriculum. So, and I feel very lucky to have gone through this journey that has now allowed me to take all of these experiences, kind of put it in a big virtual blender and help dental corporations, dental practices, dentists kind of navigate through this thing called life. Because one of the things I say constantly is that what happens between our ears will always and forevermore come before what comes out between your lips, what happens between your fingers, what you do with your feet, and what ultimately ends up in your bank account. So I'm a very firm believer in focusing on this will actually predate everything of quote success, however you define that, and your life as you know it. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I love the journey, and you and I haven't even discussed this, even though we've had many conversations to date. The journey of starting in that path at, as a teenager, and then it sounds like, if I'm doing the math right, about your early to mid 30s, of then needing it, being forced into a career change, right? And so for me, and many people who listen to the program or know me, that my journey took me into sobriety at the age of 33. And so what I wasn't doing was using any of my skills or talent, because I was pretty much just, waiting tables, picking up jobs. I mean, I had a couple of, we'll call them careers, and I'm doing the air quotes on careers, prior to getting sober. And then it was rental car for a couple of years. And then 18 years ago, found my way into dentistry, into the dental industry. And I'm so grateful for it. And it sounds like what you're talking about, of really getting into the coaching aspect of your current life path and career 13 years ago. Well, I found my way into my current life path, which is fixed full arch dentistry, right? The teeth in a day, my passion, which I found 11 years ago. And then also in the last 3 years, really finding that joy in, how do I help others to actuate their teams? And it really is the mindset piece. That's why during the opening bio and about the emotional intelligence, because as successful as clinicians are, as founders are, as CEOs, as C suite individuals, as regional managers, we can go right down the list of those in a position of power and strength, we'll call it. And that's what I typically do. Their lack of identification of what really holds them back, which is their leadership skills, right? Because they're so used to being successful in one lane, and yet they sacrifice so much in other areas when they don't have to. And myself included, right? Building a company myself. So, do you find that with those that you're working with, and what you've developed in your team approach? And share with everybody what the team approach, the TEAM approach is, because I think that could be really enlightening for those listening and really wanting to dig in a little bit and learn more about how you approach because Martin, you and I have talked about this, right? I mean, there are dozens and dozens of coaches, and dozens of leadership, and dozens of, you fill in the blank, processes and how to's, right? But so tell me a little bit, and tell my listening audience a little bit more about that, because I think that could be helpful.
Yeah. So team is an acronym. It's a modification of a framework from two of my mentors, Jen Barley and Karen Sullivan. And it stands for thoughts lead to emotions that drive our actions that manifest our results. And so the example I typically use in a keynote is I ask everybody to think of their dearest friend that they don't live with. And I go through this whole scenario where, whatever day of the week it is, it's like, okay, so today's Wednesday. Let's pretend your friend didn't, let's pretend you texted your friend last Wednesday. You haven't heard back from them. So taking care and concern and putting it to the side for a moment, what might you be thinking about said dearest friend? Oh, they're too busy for me. Who do they think they are? Blah, blah, blah. What kind of emotions does that drive? Well, anger, frustration. What kind of actions does that drive? Well, maybe a sentiment, angry text or a passive aggressive text, or you're going to count the exact number of days it took them to text you back, and you're going to wait the exact number of days to text them back when they get around to it. Then I look at them and I say, okay, how does that manifest though, elevating or maintaining said dearest friendship? It's the first person you thought of. So now let's flip the script here, folks. Now let's pretend that something happened, gosh forbid. Now what are your thoughts? Oh my gosh, what can I do? How can I help? Now what are your emotions? Love, care, compassion. Now what are your actions? Helping them out. How does that manifest it? And so what was the difference? Well, yeah, you could argue it's knowledge, but no. It was the conclusion you came to between your ears. And this happens in business and dental practices all day long. Somebody leaves a tray of instruments in the sterilization room that's against protocol, and you get all hot under the collar and you go into the break room to find that individual, and you find them in tears because you just found out something happened with their family. So what we think isn't necessarily what's happening in the world. Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, has a pretty famous quote. And it goes something like this: between stimulus and response, there's a space. In the space lies our freedom to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So what I do is I work with individuals and teams to get them to start to look at their lives and filter things differently, to challenge their thoughts, to really think about, okay, how true is that? To be more emotionally intelligent about the things that are going on between their ears. Because the National Science Foundation estimates that we have 50,000 thoughts per day. 80% of those are negative, and 95% of those are repetitive. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. So it's a big deal what goes on between our ears. So what I do ultimately with teams is actually create and facilitate, or let me rephrase, facilitate the creation of a communication alliance. It's a cornerstone. It's what kind of place do we want to show up to every day? How are we going to show up when there are challenges? How are we going to keep each other accountable? Everybody on the team. How are we going to keep each other accountable? And that's been transformative for my practices. One of my clients, this just happened. I didn't even get a chance to share this with you, that I'm going to make a case study out of. This gentleman wasn't in the best place when we started to work together a little over a year ago. We took the emotional intelligence assessment, which for those who are not familiar, it's a scientific assessment. It's mathematically scored. The mid-range is a 20-point spread, just for the sake of comparison. He improved 24 points. His practice grew double digits despite going from 8 doctor days a week to 5. And he credits everything to what was going on between his ears, because he could handle things differently. Because one of my first clients actually said something profound. Our challenges are still there. We just know how to handle them different, which I think is a very profound statement, because no one's going to do anything about the challenges. Those are always going to be there. So,
Well, and what you're talking about, and I frame it with different words, but the sentiment is definitely there. And when I start working with clients, sure, we, teach, coach, and train every touch point of the patient journey and try to create that exceptional patient experience in the fixed full arch, right? In the teeth in a day, which is my lane. The first thing that we start with when we engage a client and a team, a practice approach, when there is toxicity, okay, let's just call it what it is to try to get from reaction to response, right? It's that pause to create a space in between that you describe. And so that's the first thing we talk about, right? From reaction to response. The second thing that I thought of when you were talking is that proclivity to assumption that we have as human beings. And you described it so beautifully in what you do during your keynote speeches, right? For that best friend that doesn't live with you, of that, how dare you to, I wonder if they're okay, right? And that's that empathy piece. And empathy is huge with what we teach, coach, and train. The interesting thing is that as you're sharing that, and as some of my listeners may be thinking, and I'm sure I'm going to hear it in the socials, in social media after this is posted, because we'll probably grab that particular clip and pop it up into the IG stories because it's so poignant and I love it. It's, oh, what's all this woo woo stuff, Greg? But it's interesting because it leads right into culture of a practice. And you just talked about that and creating that case study. It drives everything. It starts at the top and it leads to my next question I want to talk about and ask you about, because it's so poignant that there is a sense of, well, as a practice owner, as the founder, as the leader, as a CEO, if you're in the manufacturing side, you need to delegate those responsibilities, right? I lead by example, but I have to delegate, which is critically important. But you're also the leader and you're leading by example. So if you're a rageaholic, or if you're a workaholic, or if you're a perfectionist, I may fall into all three of those categories from time to time and have been working on it, Martin, just to be very clear here and just to really, come at it straight and have some self honesty. If that's the case, then you're really being counterproductive in what you're trying to promote within your practice, and being counterproductive to enabling your team to get the growth and the top line productivity and the bottom line profitability that we teach, coach, and train to get better cash flow and productivity. Talk to me a little bit about that. Do you see that with clients that you work with? And how do you communicate that with potential prospects that you work with? Because that's the difficult part. It's not so much about, we can reduce your cost by 17%, we can increase your production by 12%, and we guarantee that in 6 months. And because I've just stopped that altogether. I don't make any guarantees because it's all collaborative, right? And have you found that?
Oh yeah, 100%. So that's one of the beauties, literally I'll say magic, of the 360 emotional intelligence assessment, because what that gives you is a gap analysis, for lack of a better term, to show you where you're aligned with your direct reports and where there are opportunities. And I'll give you an example because I think it's poignant. So when I work with practices, I will have the doctor or owner take the assessment. I'll have the entire team, which are direct reports, but then I will also have peers take it. So if it's a specialist, it's GPs, whatever, you get the idea. One of the ones that I've started to notice a pattern, particularly around empathy, where the doctor is close to the opinion of the peer and the team thinks they're not. And one of the most poignant experiences I had with this, because I don't have to say anything, it's just in the report. The doctor looked at me after our workshop experience, after we were, in the same room working together, because I don't debrief it till after we're done. Because can you imagine going into a workshop with your team thinking they don't think I'm empathetic? Like that would not be good. So we always debrief after. And he looked at me on the camera, just like we're doing now, and he goes, "Oh, I get it now. That makes total sense." That was not the response I was looking for. I said, "What do you mean? Why do you feel that way?" He goes, "Because I'm empathetic in my head and I don't express it." And I thought, whoa, that's impressive. So I have found that in my work. It is a challenge. When you only talk to yourself, you're always right, right? So getting that feedback from other people is critically important. Not every leader is going to be open to that, paging Captain Obvious, but the ones that are so much more effective, right? The U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics estimates that negativity cost businesses, you ready for this? $3 billion a year. That's with a B, right? And, times are changing. This year, we're sitting in 2024. I was the keynote speaker for Ivoclar's North American sales meeting. I wasn't talking to dentists. I was talking to salespeople. I was talking about how to use the science of optimism to drive strategic growth goals, to be more present for your clients, to help doctors, to help them, or labs, to help them get what it is they're looking to get. So more and more corporations and business entities are starting to, if I may be so bold, wake up and realize this stuff is real, because one of the things that I didn't realize for many years was the true power of my own journey. Because I had nothing. I was just, and I say this with respect, I was just a wet-fingered dentist outside Baltimore, Maryland. Nobody knew who the hell I was. And I had to figure things out when my entire world came crashing down. And by the way, what I didn't even say was, after I got the job at the lab, the reason why I went to the corporate job is because I got fired. Why? Because the big lab bought the small lab. So here I was again. So talk about negative messaging, talk about fear, talking about worrying about, is the bottom going to fall out tomorrow? Because man, I lived that several times. And so this mindset stuff is so critical. And it's really, you asked about observations. I mean, observations is the reason why I'm actually coming out with this leadership series on video and small group coaching cohorts, because I had some aha moments relative to, oh my gosh, wait a minute, there are patterns here. So yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey.
Well, and there's nothing more powerful than sharing from your experience. And what you just shared too about that experience of working for a lab, being bought out by a bigger lab, and then you losing your job and having to find what's next, right? That sense of fear or impending, what's going to happen. that's very relevant today, even for whether you're working for a practice as, in clinical, right? Whether it's a dental assistant, front office, doesn't matter what position, an associate, it doesn't matter what position, whether it's a failing or struggling practice or an extremely successful practice or somewhere in between, because the consolidation is real and it's gaining momentum. Now, I can't see into the future, but there certainly are. You can talk to plenty of people in the industry and, they all have predictions of what's going to happen and what has been happening and, what's more valuable now and how it's, the valuations and the M&A market. And I watch a lot of that and I listen to a lot of it. I go to a lot of the conferences in the DSO space. So I'm well aware of it, but sharing of your experience, I have found that to be true myself. And that's why I am fairly open with my own personal experience and personal journey. It's not that I've had, all a really smooth path. It All of the changes I've had in my career, even since getting sober since the age of 33, that was 20 years ago. 19 years. There's no fronts in sobriety. It's not that I made all of those decisions independently. Now, I certainly probably contributed subconsciously to it, right? Having some emotional intelligence that I've built over the last few years intentionally through self-awareness. But that experience that you share can be super valuable to others that they can relate to. And that's been my journey, and what my understanding is that people will relate to your experience, not to the medals, the accolades, because they see where individuals are now and think that seems so out of reach. But if you talk about the journey of getting there and identify with the feelings, and that's the empathy piece, right? Working with those that, handle the calls for full arch, right? You might not be able to identify with somebody who's had an upper plate forever and has having soreness and doesn't wear it because it just hasn't been comfortable for the last 3 years. But can you identify as a 24, 25-year-old with something that's been super uncomfortable? Well, I don't know. Do you have a brother or sister that's annoyed the crap out of you? That's super uncomfortable. Okay, so have some empathy, right? You can relate to and draw a parallel from. And finding that more and more that next generation struggles with empathy, believing they have it, but are in an Instagram story world and flip next, and not really engaging with and being able to coach and train that can be even more difficult. So those are definitely some things that I pull from what you share, and I think it's amazing. Well, Martin, this is the point of every podcast on the Two Sleuth podcast. All of my guests play a little something called What the Sleuth is Going On? It's 3 rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to mind, are you ready to play? Okay. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
It was in my residency for an OR patient that had been in a coma for a while, and we needed to do a lot of dental work or a lot of procedures, and so yeah, that was the worst. Period, hands down.
Not a whole lot of like oral health care going on for a patient that's been in a coma for a long time. I wouldn't imagine that would. Yeah, that's not like a first prior. No. Any wet-handed dentist, they always have like the best. They always have the best answer to those. I love it. Okay, question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
Showing more teeth, more tooth structure at rest.
More tooth structure. Wow, that's like super technical.
That's like a spear answer. I know. What can I say? Yeah. What can I say? So,
all right, for all of you who like want to see like what he means by that, head over to the YouTube channel. Even if you're listening like on one of your wherever you get your podcast, because I know it's blasted out of, and go to the YouTube channel and just fast forward to this spot or to any spot and look where his resting face is, where you can't see it. Because I had to just look and like I had to wait till he rested. And I was like, okay, now I gotta look. Now I'm gonna go and have to go look in post-production. All right, fair enough. Okay. But that's very technical. I love it. So question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own if you've invented one or you have one in process, which one would you choose and why?
It has to be a dental product.
I mean, that's the question.
Okay. Let's just check it. Um,
Why are you trying to change the question?
that's a really good. Don't you hate it when you think of something and then the name flies out of your head? Um,
You can describe it. You can do charades.
yeah. No, I think it would be the mouth prop suction device. That name just totally flew out of my head. That has a light in
Isolate.
it. Isolate. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For the obvious reasons, but also just for workflow reasons, like your assistant's sick that day, or dental students or whatever else. I think it's a really cool idea. It's a really cool device. It's simple in essence. But see, now I want to tell you what I almost invented and missed by 6 months.
Well, I mean, that what the sleuth is going on, that's over now. So you can certainly transition into that. Absolutely.
So I'm not kidding. I literally almost invented location services.
Oh.
So I'll tell you the story real quick. In 2003, went to the Baltimore Washington International Airport. They just installed a system where you could look in the garage above the spots and it was green or red. So I had a thought, this is 2003, so remember, none of these things. So I thought, what if you had a fob that could lead you back to your car? Then one of my friends was like, well, they're talking about putting phones in PDAs. Maybe you should include that. So I literally drew a sketch, had a family friend sign it because to mark it in time, hired a patent attorney to search for the idea, and discovered that somebody came up with the idea literally verbatim, word for word, 6 months before me. And it was the description of location services. So we wouldn't even be talking because I'd be literally a billionaire.
So basically what I'm hearing you say is I'm super fortunate that somebody came up with location services 6 months before, because we wouldn't be friends, and all of my listening audience wouldn't hear all of these great pearls and all of the people that you've helped and will help in the future.
Yep.
This is your path.
Yeah.
It's meant to be.
I know. It's crazy though.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to respect your time and my listening audience's time, especially those that do a specific run for 30 minutes. And so I don't want them being exhausted and dying on the path because it's 45 minutes long. In the last few minutes though, is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share or you want to point out, lift up in the last few minutes of the show?
Yeah. So I'll give you my link. That's my Linktree link with all my links. So I'm coming out as of September 1st with a leadership curriculum that I am so stupid excited about. And it's in 6 parts. It can be self-study or we can do it in small groups, but it's based on that observation question that you asked me. And so we start with what's getting in the way between your ears. We engage the Clifton Strengths Assessment, which has been taken over 32 million times to help you understand where your strengths are. I'm going to help you organize and categorize your day. I'm going to help you navigate through that day. I'm going to help you delegate. And I'm going to help you communicate with difficult conversations when emotions run high and opinions vary. And so, again, it's a 6-part series. It's due out September 1st. I am really excited about this. And there's a link in my link tree to just simply give me your email to be notified when it's available. So there's no obligation. And I'm really excited about it. So hit me up. Let me know.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll make sure that we get all of your contact information with your link tree in the show notes. My guest today on the Two Sleuth podcast has been Dr. Martin Mendelson. I mean, so many great things: an executive coach, team coaching and facilitation expert on emotional intelligence, happiness studies. Thank you so much for being a guest and for being a good friend and a leader in the dental industry. Thank you so much.